Sarah. Hey, how are you?
Good.
Awesome, awesome. Happy Wednesday. Congrats on this big news. How was your Christmas though? How was the holiday season?
So it was a lot better, finally having that decision like off my plate. I think before that I had gone like back and forth and I just wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And so like making that decision like a little before Christmas, it was like a huge relief off my shoulders. So it's good.
Yeah, I can imagine. Pretty good present to get right there. So, awesome stuff. And all right, so I got to ask Sarah, like, you have three kids, right?
Two.
Two. Okay. All right. Sorry to add one on there, but I'm curious, like, for you as a mom, how have the holidays changed most, like, as you expanded the family? Like, I'm sure it's a little bit different, you know, with them having a brother sister dynamic now. Just like, do you notice a change as you have two now?
Uh, no, I think that because they're separated by 10 years.
Mm.
So kind of like they're both each getting their own full attention and full like childhood. Whereas I think if they were like a couple years apart, there might be a little more competition. But honestly, like my daughter, she helps. She's like super caring and nurturing, so she helps with him a lot. So it's like almost like now raising a kid with like a third mini adult. So hype up the excitement, and she just makes it better. So it's good.
Yeah. All right. That is very cool. Then, and what you guys went to Sequoia Park? I think I saw on your Instagram. Did some traveling, sort of, if you count that as traveling.
It's like a like 3 or I think it's close to 4 hours away. And I count that because that's hard with a young kid. Um, I think for me, like it doesn't feel like Christmas if I don't see some snow. Maybe being raised in the Northeast and I lived in Iowa and Minnesota and it just doesn't feel like Christmas. Like I walked around in Sacramento and took pictures of people's roses. I'm like, there are flowers. It just blew my mind. So bit of snow. There's that little northeast girl inside of me that needs it.
Yeah, there you go. Gotta. It just seems fitting to have, yeah, the snow around White Christmas and all that. So good deal for sure. But all right, sir. I mean, as for like the Bellator aspect, this is super cool. Obviously, change of scenery and everything. Something that I think a little bit surprising to see for you because whenever fighters in the UFC are winning and still doing good and top 10 ranked like you are, don't usually expect to see them leave. But obviously, went out in a uniquer situation. So like I know you mentioned it a little bit in your post yesterday, but just like how difficult I guess was it making a relatively big transition? Obviously Bellator is still a huge promotion as well, top two, right? If you will, in North America at least. Like how difficult I guess was it to come to? I'm sure scary and whatnot, making the move and everything.
The biggest shift for me of all of this decision was whether or not I wanted to move up to featherweight.
Mm.
And while I was in the UFC, I had debated it too. And not that I can't make 135, because obviously I can every time, but the longer you make a weight class and a cut, the more I feel like your body kind of starts to resist you a little bit. It doesn't want to be too lean. It doesn't, it starts to get a little bit more difficult to get your body to cooperate. And that's why you see people who had previously made weight without a problem and it gets progressively harder and they start missing weight. Your body almost like it's like a self-preservation thing and it starts to resist you. So it's even harder to work off those pounds. And I never had like too much of a problem, but I felt like in my heart, I was like, if I have to go a 25-minute grueling fight, is that weight cut going to affect me? And I didn't like the fact that I didn't know.
Mm.
So, maybe I will move up to featherweight when I was still in the UFC. And I was like, but there's no real clear path. I mean, would I just be fighting one-offs, And so like I didn't know if that would be a smart decision. Whereas the bantamweight was like a more established, more promoted. It might have been a better choice being in the UFC. But then, looking around other promotions, like the Bellator doesn't even have a bantamweight option. So it's like I'd go to featherweight, and I was like, In wrestling, I had wrestled at 138.75, but most of the year they have a 2 kilo allowance. So I actually competed the majority of the time at 143.
Mm.
So I was like, I can handle that. And I know I feel good. I know I feel good not cutting to 136 or 135. And so I was like, okay, I think I can do it and be successful. Because the last thing I want to do is move up a weight class and feel like I'm undersized or, like I'm not going to be successful at that weight class. And so I had to like really dig deep and ask myself if I felt like I could do well at that weight, no matter who the competition is. And I think that being healthier and fresher, I think I'll be a better fighter, especially in the later rounds.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, at this point, like you're a master of weight cutting, with the wrestling experience and, just you've never had any trouble with the bantamweight. Like you said, obviously you had just like the one catch weight fight against Tanya Evinger was 140, right? That's like the only.
That was a short notice
Yeah.
fight. And I would have made 135. I just thought at the time she was ranked pretty high in the world. And it was like my fourth pro fight. And I was like, I'm I'm not in a training camp, so I'm not in the condition that I want to be in. And you have to be in really good condition to cut weight. Your body has to be able to handle that stress that's put on it. So I'm like, if I'm going to be stressing it in a short notice fight, I don't want to stress it with a weight cut as well. So I just negotiated a catch weight, and I felt great. So it was a smart choice.
Yeah, there you go. And so like, have you noticed any, like you kind of mentioned a little bit there, having done it for so long and everything, did it get more, was it more difficult kind of making the cut? I mean, you get so used to it and everything, but as time goes on, obviously it takes a little bit each and every time. So like how serious, I guess, with everything considered, UFC obviously not having really a division, like were the thoughts that serious at any point about trying to do it there? I mean, obviously it's easier this way, but just how was that thought process like?
It was. I thought about it, especially if I got like a big opportunity, like a short notice title fight or things like that. If somebody dropped out, like last minute, that would be because I'm like I could make weight no problem. But like I said, like I still wanted to be in the premier weight class in the UFC, not the one that they don't seem like they don't even, if you look up UFC featherweight women's, like you can't find anything. You just see a picture of Amanda Nunes and nothing else. And I'm like, I don't know if that would be a smart move, like, so I was like, I'll just keep cutting because I can make the weight. And so far I'm doing 3 rounds. And I knew that if I just fought my way to like a title contender spot, I'm like, okay, I will have to like readjust my weight and make it where it's not as much of a weight cut, but that's really difficult to do. It's really, really difficult to do. And I already noticed that like, whereas before I could start like 3 to 4 weeks out, I now had to start like 5 to 6 weeks out to like eat very clean, get my body very, and all of that takes a toll on your training camp too.
Mm.
So, it's like, it's millimeters, but in the biggest performances of your life, millimeters count.
Yeah, no kidding. And it's just all about getting the preparation down. So it's a lot that goes into it and what it can take away from, like you said, with the actual, the training part. You don't want to put too much onto just getting your body ready. So yeah, I think obviously the less the better will be very nice for you. But last thing on the weight, I guess, Sarah, like, do you have any specific fight that you remember as your hardest weight cut? Was there anything that stood out for the bantamweight fights?
I think one of my toughest weight cuts was my title fight with Ronda, which is, still earlier in my career, but I woke up that morning like unusually high. I had to cut 7 pounds that morning, which is for me. And then also I had a scale that like, I just had like a cheap little scale because you can't have like a serious register scale bringing it like not a certified scale, hauling it around while you're cutting weight. So I just had a small little scale. And I remember going in and cutting, and I walked back out because I did not lose significant amount enough to register. It just said the same exact weight. And
Oh no.
like, because your body can just stop sweating. It can just stop sweating or stop losing. And it was like the biggest fight of my career to that point. So I was like, no. So like that, cutting 7 pounds the day of, like I was just not optimal.
Yeah, that'd be a little bit scary and stressful.
Vegas, so it was like a separate sauna. So it was just me by myself cutting weight. I couldn't even like have my coaches rally the troops or whatever. But I did then. I held some stuff that was heavier to recalibrate my scale, and then I stepped on it again, and I'd lost a pound. So I was like, oh my god, thank you. I was about to freaking have a meltdown.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, made it work in the end, but no fun, no fun. So obviously we'll have to worry about that less in the featherweight division. And I guess last thing for real this time on the weight, Sarah. But how much would you say? Like, what do you walk around at? Was it, making that drop super significant? I mean, obviously not compared to some people, I'm sure.
So, well, I walk around at like 147, 148, but I'm always lean. I'm always working out. So this is cutting, 12 to 13 pounds off of somebody who just doesn't have that much to lose. And obviously I find ways to lose body fat, but I mean, you can just see the difference in my face. You can see the difference in, like, I have clothes that fit me better, just different weight cutting clothes than my regular clothes. And so I lose body fat, but women can't comfortably lose too much body fat without it causing problems. And you can't hold your weight down for too long of a period either, because you start to feel like you're sick all the time. So that really impacts training.
Yeah.
Like, it's the hardest, it's a tough combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've managed to stay ready so you don't have to get ready in most cases, right? So very nice, very nice. But all right, Sarah, I mean, ideas for the debut time. Obviously, it's been a little bit since you thought you wanted to fight sooner, but obviously we'll get into why things didn't work out there. But do you have any ideas yet of maybe when you could debut or opponent possibilities? I know still fresh, but what's the talk right now that you can share?
Like their full roster, as far as like, I know who they are and I know I can recognize people, but as far as like scouting, like and doing more in-depth stuff, I just haven't done that yet. Just only more maybe like the top people, but coming in and testing out a new weight class, like I probably would fight somebody, like medium high in the rankings, and then build from there, obviously. But no, I mean, I could fight like when they have a card or they have like a slot open, like maybe March. That would be great.
All right, very cool.
Yeah. Hard because they match out cards, but sometimes things fall through, so I can be ready.
Absolutely. Like I said, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. But it's funny, Sarah, like when I saw the news yesterday, the first thing that popped in mind, and I'm sure it popped in mind for a bunch of people, was like, oh, wow, the possibility of Sara McMann versus Cyborg is something that was never really in my mind at all. So did you ever imagine that being a possibility? Obviously, you were in the UFC together, but not the same weight and all these things. Invicta too, right? I think she would have been there at the same time. But was this ever something you could have thought of being as realistic as it is now?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Because she's fought at 140 in the UFC. So that's splitting the weight classes. So I knew that was a possibility. At that time, I didn't want to go up to 145, especially because that'd be giving her more of an advantage at that point than me. But yeah, I don't know if our time in Invicta crossed over the same timeline, because when I fought for like a title contender in Invicta, and before I could fight for that title, Strikeforce, was available. So and she might have signed with them after, because I know that she had other contracts too. So I'm just not sure like how everything, like if we were there at the same time. But yeah, no, absolutely. If there's someone that like is within my weight range, like 25 people who struggle to make 125 coming up, or people who, can make the cut to 135. Like I kept them on my radar, because it's like, maybe they're fighting at this weight class now because, that's where they want to be. But, things change. People lose body fat. People can't make a weight cut anymore. So people shift around. So if you're kind of like close to my weight class, then I've always like thought it's a possibility.
All right, fair enough. And I mean, Sarah, we got to fantasize a little bit now about how the matchup would look. And honestly, like thinking about it, I think, stylistically and everything, you kind of come right in and make for possibly the biggest challenge that she could face. I mean, just kind of if you look at your wrestling and everything, when she has fought, better grapplers in the past, yes, Cyborg has a black belt and everything. We know her for her striking more so and everything. But, like, for example, past opponent we just mentioned, Tanya Evinger, she got some takedowns on Cyborg in their UFC fight. Like, we've seen people have maybe more success when they go to the takedowns against her. And obviously that's no problem for you. So I think, like, all right. And then your power can also match. So, like, I'm very excited for that possibility. But when you look at it, just fantasizing here right now, how do you think that you do match up with her?
They match up really well. I've always preferred people who are well-rounded, but their preference is striking because they're a little easier to take down. They just stand up a little bit taller. So when you're committing to your strikes, it's the scariest time to shoot, but it's also the easiest. You're committing your weight forward, so planted. And that's exactly what we look for whenever we're taking people down, is planted feet, So I'm not, like I said, I wrestled at 143. So I'm not worried about, the size, because she has to make 145. So you can only gain so much after that. I know that she has like a super strenuous weight cut. So like that will also favor me in later rounds rather than her. But also like I respect her in all the areas. And I don't think one area will be easier, but I feel like my wrestling in my jiu-jitsu on my top position is really, really strong against anybody in the world.
Absolutely. And, Sarah, another one of the things everyone was kind of talking about with the news was like multi-fight deal. She's 42. Oh my goodness. How long is she going to even make it through this? Like we talked before the Aspen fight earlier this year, and like that's not something you're thinking about. You're just going until you physically can't anymore, right? That's kind of the idea. And why not when you're still being as good as you are and beating the people that you are? So like with that in mind. Oh, go on. Sorry.
If my body says like I don't have any major injuries, any minor injury I have in training or fights is something I could have gotten in my 20s. And I've done a lot of homework and diligence and discipline to keep speed and strength up. So I'm just a more experienced fighter, but I don't think that I've lost very much from, when I started fighting at 30. I mean, theoretically past my prime. So like, I don't know. I just don't see that. I just don't feel what maybe other fighters see a decline. And if I see a decline in myself, I will call it. I'll say, this isn't for you anymore. But it just keeps on happening.
Yeah, it's not there yet. I mean, we can see it in the performances. So I think it's kind of funny, and it's not fair for people to say this about you when look at freaking Yoel Romero's like the male version of you doing just fine, and people no one's saying anything about him. So let's be quiet, everybody.
That those don't really bother me, because on the whole, athletes do decline when they get older, but I'm just an anomaly. I don't know why. I think my parents gave me phenomenal genetics, but it could be that I focus so much more on technique and efficiency than just using raw power. I have power, but I don't use it like crazy. I don't, dump my bucket in the first 2 minutes. I use it very intelligently, and so I think that has given me more longevity, and the fact that I compete once per night rather than a tournament style. That makes older fighters, like, it gives you a little bit more time in your prime.
Yeah, certainly not as strenuous, I guess, having to put that wear and tear all compacting it into one night with that tournament style. But what I was getting at though, Sarah, was like, obviously you want to test out the waters a little bit with a fight at featherweight, maybe before jumping to a title shot and everything. But I think, honestly, one would be all you need to justify maybe giving you one right away. I could even see him giving it to you right away, but that's more of a preference thing, right? But, like, ideally, how many do you want to have before, potential title shots in Bellator?
I think that whatever, I don't know what they need to be able to, one, market it well, and two, like I don't want to like come in and step on any toes or skip any lines. I like to do things the right way. And so showing that I deserve a title shot, showing that I am the best contender is really important to me too. Like, so I don't mind if I have like one or two fights before that happens. That seems reasonable to me because it's a new weight class. And so I kind of do, for me, I feel like I have to prove a little bit, not a ton, but I do have to prove a little bit like, yeah, I belong in this weight class and, I can put my money where my mouth is, that I can go out there and beat girls that are, my size or a little bit bigger than me.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm very excited to see how it all plays out, and a great way to start off the new 2023, new year, new you, Sarah. Literally. So, yeah, very exciting, very fun. But I want to circle back to the UFC departure though a little bit, just because, like I said, it was a unique way to go out on a win, top 10 contender, all these things. Technically finishing out the contract with a fight because of the cancellation. And yeah, last time we talked was before the Aspen fight in San Diego, I believe. So then it got rescheduled again for, was it September? More recently anyway. Were you bummed to like not go out of the UFC with an actual fight? You know what I mean? Like you could count the Carol Hosa one, but not getting to fight Aspen and all the frustrations of just that whole ordeal.
Was just a frustrating situation all around. But I, so my career has been riddled with fights falling through from my amateur days. So I think after a certain point, I just understood that that's sometimes the nature of it. In wrestling, if I came in to compete, I always had somebody that, like I always had competition. I think now doing this for like 13 years, like you just can't let that stuff get to you. There's just a lot of thing that comes with fighting on this kind of stage, and opponents falling out is one of them. So I did my part. And so I can, be at peace with the fact that I still did my job and I showed up ready to fight. So it doesn't really it doesn't upset me. I would have felt worse if I went out there, even going out on a win against Aspen, I would have been upset because I perpetuated people being able to miss weight and still get fights. There was a little bit of principle there for me that's like, no, you didn't do your job, and so you shouldn't get to reap the rewards, even if you're giving me a percentage of your purse. You're still making out pretty dang good. You don't, because in wrestling or IBJJF, if you go and you don't make weight, that's it. You don't compete. There's no asking your opponents. There's no negotiation. It's like, that's your job. So I still have that little old school mentality.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, she has also left the UFC and got onto the PFL, and a lot of people were thinking like, oh, well, now they're just going to both leave and go fight in the PFL. Because that was something I was seeing a little bit. So were there any talks with the PFL? I'm sure you talked to multiple people, but obviously they would be maybe the second best option out there. Was there any possibility there for you?
I don't really talk to anybody. I didn't talk to Bellator, or I don't talk, at all really with the UFC. Cause for me, I like to stay very separate from these issues. That's why I have a manager. If I was going to go talk to them, why would I pay her?
Yes, yes.
So I think that if you manage yourself, if sometimes you can do that when you're younger, but I think that if you don't have somebody else going out and just negotiating all of these deals, it can become too personal. It can become, and so I just basically said, hey, I'm going to figure out whether I want to definitely stay at 135 or if I want to go 145. And if you are looking at 145, we just she talked to everybody, every single promotion that has either 135 or 145. She's like, okay, I'm going to see where everybody's at. And for me though, to be truthful, Bellator was always my top choice. So that if I was going to stay at 135, the UFC is probably the premier place for that weight class. If I was going to go 145, I feel like Bellator has the most depth. They've invested in their featherweights. They are, cultivating strong contenders. So if I was going to go, I just want to be like truly the best in the world, and I just felt like the Bellator was that place.
I don't think there's much arguing with any of that there, Sarah. So it all worked out, and a very professional approach from you. I'm not surprised, and we got a shout out to Jennifer Goldstein. She is fantastic indeed. So I got to give her some love, especially on the holiday season. So shout outs to Jennifer. But all right, Sarah, I want to leave you with some tough questions before I let you go. Always like to do that. I know we got into some good history last time we chatted, but this might be actually an easy question now I think about it. But when you look back on your losses, I'm curious, like, is there which one you would choose to get back if you could? Which one you'd want the rematch the most for?
So, um, that's tough because I hate losing. The answer would probably be all of them. um, there's only a couple that there's only like two that I truly regret. I regret going into that fight, and I feel like I should have known better. But one is the most is that I had a severe injury before fighting Ketlin Vieira, and it happened 2.5 weeks before my fight. And I should have pulled out of that fight, and it 100% cost me. And that's the only one I regret. If I lost other ways, it's just like, hey man, they were just better on that day. You got to be woman enough that you're not going to win them all. But I think the seasoned competitor in me, I should have known better. And so I regret making a choice that I feel like I knew was the wrong decision, and I paid for it. And so if there's other times in my life that I didn't pay for it, I went out, and I was kind of compromised and I still did well, but I didn't perform well. I still won. So that kind of lulled me into a false sense of security that maybe I could do that again. But I was very compromised, and it was just a foolish decision, and I should have known better. So that's the one I'd redo if I could.
All right, all right. Yeah, I mean, they're all learning experiences in very different ways, right? So
Hard learning lesson in a promotion that losses make such a big difference. So it's a tough lesson. It's a hard pill to swallow.